Hey everyone. Sorry I haven't released a video in some time. I've been going through a lot of personal stuff right now and just a very, very busy season of my life. But I'm excited to get back into doing these videos. And I do want to just thank you guys so much for all of your incredible support for the project of this book. I'm reaching the end of the editing process by the end of October. The editing process is going to be done, and I'm going to move into the publishing process. So again, I just want to thank you guys for your support, for watching these videos, for sharing them, for liking them, for subscribing, and for donating financially. It's all been an incredible, incredible blessing to me. I've actually almost raised all the money that I need to for the entirety of the project, which is just amazing and incredible. I never thought that was going to happen. I just need to raise a little bit more money, so I'm going to leave a link in the description below if you want to donate any more money or donate money at all to the project. I would greatly, greatly appreciate it. But yeah, it's so exciting to see my book come together and to be ready to go into the publishing process. It's incredible. But anyway, let's get into today's video. So I just finished a series on depression. And the reason why I started with depression when it comes to the idea of processing emotions is because for me, I was someone who always suppressed my emotions. I never thought about them. I never really went through them. I never processed them as a result. And so because of that, even though the negative memories of my past weren't really bothering me, I never really got PTSD in that sense, I realized that my emotions were still very much in control of the way that I lived and the way that I acted. And my depression was a huge sign of that. And so as I started to learn how to pray to God in that deep, personal, and intimate way, sharing with Him my emotional state, sharing with Him what I was going through, and being able to receive comfort from Him and strength, it still is an incredible process in my life. It's just incredibly beautiful to see how God works and how God moves in these ways. But as I was doing that, He started to show me that there were other emotional issues in my life that I hadn't yet dealt with. And the one that I'm going to talk about today is bitterness and anger. So I never really thought of myself as a bitter person, and that shouldn't really shock me because in the Bible it describes bitterness as a root, and that's from the book of Hebrews. What it means is that bitterness is under the surface. It's sometimes imperceptible. Sometimes you can think that you're not a bitter person, and actually you are. You're someone who does hold on to grudges, and you are someone who struggles a lot with anger. The way that I knew that I was struggling with bitterness is the way that I was responding to my present day circumstances. I found myself overreacting in situations all the time. I found myself becoming very frustrated very quickly, and I found myself becoming very aggressive with people verbally and even pushing them away in my anger on a frequent basis. And actually people started pointing this out to me. They were like, Peter, whenever you talk about the military, whenever you talk about your time in Afghanistan, you get very upset. You get noticeably upset, and it's a little weird. It's a little even scary at times. What's going on? And it caused me to evaluate my heart of like, am I bitter? Am I angry? Are there things happening that I'm just not dealing with? And as I started to reflect like that in my mind, I started to pray like that. God, is there bitterness in me? Am I angry about these things? And that's my first encouragement to you guys. If you've gone through anything in your life that's been traumatic or horrible, and you found yourself to being more and more of a bitter and angry person, evaluate your heart, evaluate your mind before God, and just say, do I have bitterness that I just haven't dealt with? And as I prayed that, God started to show me, yeah, you do. And the main bitterness that He started to bring to mind was the bitterness I had towards God Himself. So this even takes on a new dimension of difficulty as a Christian, because as a Christian, I was kind of always taught that you always show God reverence and respect. So you don't dare go to God and accuse Him or be upset or angry with Him. You just go and you have a kind of a stoic face, and you say like, God, hey, everything you do is great and awesome, and I'm just thankful to you, and I'm just going to live my life and worship and serve you. And so I never was honest to God when I had bitter thoughts or angry thoughts towards Him. And I found in my time of counseling that many Christians are in that boat. So they've convinced themselves that they're not actually angry at God or actually bitter with God, but in reality they are. In reality they hold a lot of bitterness and resentment towards Him. And God started to show me how this looked in my life. And for me, it looked like a wall. There was a wall of separation between me and God, a wall that kept me from trusting Him, a wall that kept me from wanting Him in my life to be closer to Him. And that wall was just always there. And so many Christians I talk to, it's the same thing. That when I do talk to them about their past and God's involvement, they don't want to talk about it, or they get angry. They get visibly angry, and it shows that they do have a little bit of anger towards God for allowing them to go through these horrible events. Also, you realize that when you talk about present day issues, a lot of times they don't want to invite God into their present day issues because they're afraid that God's going to make horrible calamities happen to them again. They secretly do blame God for all these issues of their life, and they really do think he's kind of out to get them. They're very standoffish in their prayers, and they don't like inviting God in to the issues that are going on right now in their current day-to-day lives. And the reason is because they have this bitterness that they just have never, ever dealt with. And the surprising thing to me, as I started to realize this in my own life, is how prevalent this issue is within the scriptures. I expected when I read through the Bible that everyone who was talking to God would always just come like that, very reverent, just like, hey God, it doesn't really matter. Anything you want to do is great, and I'm just going to serve you and love you no matter what. But that's not what you see. In pretty much every situation in the Bible where you get to follow someone for any length of time, they express deep bitterness towards God. Things that you would be like, wow, I can't believe this is in the Bible. I mean, you read some of the prayers of King David, where he expresses deep frustrations towards God and the things that are happening in his life. I think the most notable example is when David is trying to transport the Ark of the Covenant back into Jerusalem, and during that time, one of the people that was helping him touches the Ark to try to keep it from falling off an oxen cart, and he is struck dead. And David becomes very upset with God when this happens. You have Job, who outright accuses God of unrighteousness for the wicked and horrible things that were happening in his own life. Elijah the prophet in 1 Kings chapter 19, he expresses frustration towards God. Jeremiah over and over again expresses frustration towards God. And even in the New Testament, you have saints in the New Testament like Mary of Bethany. After Lazarus dies, she becomes very upset with Jesus for allowing that to happen. And even John the Baptist, who Jesus said was the greatest man born of woman, was beginning to become frustrated at Jesus for the fact that he was in prison and Jesus was supposed to be bringing in the kingdom of heaven. So if you're experiencing anger or frustration towards God, don't be ashamed of that. That's an incredibly normal thing. Why? Because we're living our lives in this finite, restricted perspective. All we see are the things immediately around us. When God is allowing evil into your life, you have to understand there is a plan and a purpose for that. And we'll talk more about this in my next video, which I'm going to release hopefully next week. But because God has that eternal perspective and he knows exactly what he's doing, you, with your finite perspective, who don't understand what God is doing, it's the most natural thing in the world to become frustrated. To look at God and be like, do you care? Do you care about what's happening to me? Do you care about what's going on in my life? Are you there? Do you have the power to do it and you're just not willing? Or are you willing and you're just not able? What kind of a God are you? And when we hold in these frustrations, they don't go away, they grow. So, and again, I'll talk about this more next week. Yes, it is wrong to have these feelings of anger and hatred towards God, because God doesn't do anything wrong. He is not trying to hurt you. He is not against you, but he is allowing these things for a purpose that you just might not be able to see or understand, which in and of itself is a frustrating truth. But then when you have these feelings and you hide them, that's even more wrong, because you're being dishonest. God knows your heart. He knows when you're upset with him, right? And he's big enough to take it if you want to talk to him about these things. You hiding these things from him is not going to do you any good whatsoever. So my encouragement to you is, if you are struggling with bitterness towards God, have the liberty and the freedom to start expressing these things towards God. Read some of the passages that I mentioned in this video. Go through them and see how these Old Testament saints responded to God, how they talked to God in their frustrations, how they didn't hide the ways that they were feeling, and see how God responds. Because my thought was, man, if I tell these things to God, he's going to push himself away from me. He's not going to want anything to do with me if I say these things. He's going to get so upset with me. But you don't see that. In fact, I'll give you a prime example. In John 11 and 12, when Mary says these things to God, these horrible accusations, Jesus just weeps with her. Right? He doesn't accuse her. He doesn't get upset with her. He meets her right where she's at. Right? So when you express these frustrations towards God, don't expect that he's just going to look at you and be like, I'm done. I can't believe you would even think that. No, God understands. He understands what you're going through. He understands why you're feeling the way that you're feeling. And he weeps with you. And he's sad about the things that have happened in your life. And he wants to be a comfort for you. So don't be afraid to share these things with him. And for friends and family members out there, a little bit of advice for you. If you're talking to someone who's gone through a tragedy and they start expressing frustration towards God, don't be that Christian that corrects so easily and quickly. I think about Job, right? When Job was hanging out with his friends, one of the first things that happens is Job starts complaining, right? He starts being like, man, I wish I wasn't born. This is horrible. My life is terrible. I can't believe the things that God has allowed into my life. And his friends immediately rebuke him. They're like, Job, how dare you say that? How dare you say these things? God knows what he's doing, and you just need to submit to that. You need to admit that you were wrong. You need to admit that there's sin in your life, and that's why God allowed these things. And they go on and on and on this tirade of bad theology. Now, Job, after that, he says something really interesting. He says, you are worthless counselors for you to rebuke the words of a desperate man, knowing that his words are but wind. This is what he's saying. He's like, I know that God isn't evil. Right? If I believed that, I would just leave God, right? I know that he's not evil. I know he's not wicked, but I feel so hurt right now, and I'm just expressing my frustrations. I know my words don't have any weight. They're wind. They're going to blow away, but I'm desperate. I'm hurting. I don't need theology right now. I need comfort. And so for those of you guys, when you're trying to comfort someone who's really struggling, really feel the room, really feel where they're at. What do they need right now? Do they need a theological answer, or do they simply need you to just be there for them? Now, don't get me wrong. There will be times where the theological answer needs to come, right? Where you do need to remind them of the faithfulness and the goodness of God, where you do need to defend the beauty and the goodness of God. There will be times where you're going to need to do that. But pick your battles and pick your moments, right? Really feel where this person is at. Do they need the theological answer, or do they just need me? Do they just need me to be there for them, to hear them out, to validate them, and to pray for them? And it's kind of a hard thing to discern, but there are times and moments for both types of comfort, and they're both important in the healing process. So look for my next video, where I'm going to talk more about this idea of how does the sovereignty of God mix with the horrible things that we've been through. Why does he allow these things into our life? But man, if this has blessed you in any way, please again hit the subscribe button. Please like the video, share it with anyone who you think might be benefited by it, and I look forward to talking to you guys next week.